How's it going, everybody? Welcome into the Skyline Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Jack Hartman, joined as always by my good friend, my co-host from the West Coast, Nick Normand. Nick, how you doing today, man?
Doing well today, man. Enjoying a lovely Friday post Thursday night football last night. I know talking with you before this, you didn't see it. Very good game. Falcons were down by 2 touchdowns in start of the fourth quarter. Kirk Cousins clutch. Big Kyle Pitts game. Kyle Pitts was balling. Bijan obviously balling. He's an incredible running back, but man, Mike Evans was pissed after the game too. I don't know if you
I did
saw
see
the
that.
clips about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But he was like, bro, it was 3rd and 28. And I'm just thinking, like, you didn't give up the 3rd and 28. You gave up 14 on 3rd and 28 and then gave up 4th and 14. Like, it's not like you
Yeah.
gave up 28 yards on one play, but like, I get why he's angry. He's an all timer. He's great. We love Mike Evans, but
For sure.
yeah, fun game last night. Fun Thursday night football. How are you
Cool.
doing, Jack?
Yeah, doing well. Doing well. We're here to talk some college football.
Mm-hmm.
We are, as of right today, exactly a week from the first round of the college football playoff. We are at the end of the week, filled with craziness in the college football world related to Notre Dame and some accurate things they're saying and some wildly inaccurate things they're saying. Also, this week there was the incident with Sharon Moore in Michigan football. We're not going to be talking about that today. Eventually, when it gets to the point that it's appropriate to talk just about the football aspect of that in Michigan looking for a new head coach, or maybe once they make a hire, we'll talk about that. But we today, not just today, every day in here, we're just here to talk about the football aspect of things. We don't want to get into the other stuff, and so we're not going to be addressing that today, though it is big news. And of course, our thoughts and prayers are with the Moore family, his wife and daughters, with the family of the staffer, that this stuff is happening with her as well. But we are talking first here this morning or this afternoon about the college football playoff. We have the first four games set. Oklahoma will be hosting Alabama, a rematch of a game a few weeks ago. That'll be at Oklahoma. That'll be the Friday night game. Saturday at noon, we've got Miami traveling to College Station to play Texas A&M. And then also in the afternoon and then evening, we've got Tulane heading to Mississippi for a rematch, and James Madison going to Eugene, Oregon to play Oregon. So, Nick, let's just start first. Just looking at the 12 team field that we have right now, and we're going to talk about some, quote unquote fixes to the college football playoff later. But if we're just looking at the 12 team field, we're looking at these first four games. Which one of these first four games is the most intriguing to you?
Mm, I have really two in mind here, I would say, Jack. I think I'll go with Alabama, Oklahoma. I just think that the quarterbacks are better in this game. I think that Alabama coach Kalen DeBoer, from all the reports, it feels like as a head coach at Alabama following Saban, there's just so much pressure there. It's a situation where it feels like every single loss feels like a national championship loss. It feels like every single win is just a drop in the bucket. Like it just feels like any game that they're in that is close is high pressure. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's why last week with them struggling against Georgia, I feel like it sets a stage for a very high tension game against Oklahoma, a team that they lost against already. I think that Oklahoma, because of their elite defense, has a path to win this game. I don't know that I would necessarily pick them. I think that this should be a close game. I think that both of these teams are quite good teams. But just looking at this, I think that the quarterbacks, even though they're not playing their best football right now, the defenses should be playing at a pretty darn good level. The coaching is really great between DeBoer and Venables. I think these are just two teams with a lot of talent, even if they're not playing to the highest level right now. I think it should be a really competitive and close game and a really tough and physical game in a lot of regards. I think that if Alabama is able to establish the run in any capacity and be able to throw off of play action with the run, then you're going to see that turn the tide and Oklahoma really struggle. But the thing is, that is a hard ask against this really stout Oklahoma defense. So I think this will be a really good game, really fun rematch, really great coaches in this matchup. What about you, Jack?
Yeah, I'm more intrigued by this this Texas A&M Miami game. And here's why. If you look at Texas A&M's schedule, there is nothing impressive to me about their record. They got the SEC bias benefit that we see, in that they're ranked really high because they went 11-1, and you look at how good their how good their record was, and they're in the SEC. 5 of their conference games were against the 5 worst teams in the conference. Okay. Arkansas is at the very bottom, South Carolina, Mississippi State, Auburn, and Florida. Okay, those 5 teams are the bottom 5 teams in the SEC. They beat all of them. Arkansas this year went 2-10, 0-8 in the conference. A&M beat them by a field goal. South Carolina went 4-8, 1-7 in conference. They beat them by 1 point. Auburn went 5-7, 1-7 in conference. Fired their head coach. They only beat them by 6 points. So like, if we actually look at this and just peer through turn the pages a little bit into this, like, this is not all that it seems. They've got the win on the road in South Bend against Notre Dame early in the season. That to some that carries weight. To me, not as much, because if you look at what Notre Dame did outside of playing Miami and Texas A&M and losing to both of them, all of the rest of their games, it's like, I don't know. You look at A&M; they've got a ranked win over Missouri, who is no longer in ranked. They went, I think they went 8-4, and they were kind of that team this year that just always sort of stayed in the top 25. That bottom SEC team that just always kind of stayed in the top 25. So I mean, I'm really, really intrigued to see Texas A&M play Miami, because the other thing is, if you look at Miami, they're sort of in a similar boat. Like they beat Miami, they beat Notre Dame, week 1. They've got the win over South Florida, which doesn't seem like much, but if you remember, South Florida came into that game ranked. They had beaten Boise State, who started the season ranked, and then they beat Florida State, or no, excuse me, they beat Florida, who started the season ranked. So that was kind of a hot team that had some momentum. But then you look at Miami. Okay, they beat Florida. Florida wasn't good. They beat Florida State by 6 points. Florida State ended up falling off. They lose to Louisville by a field goal. Louisville at one point popped into the top 25, but sort of fell off, and didn't end up there. They lose to SMU in overtime. SMU, another team that sort of popped in there, kind of fell off then in the end. They beat Syracuse, doesn't mean anything. They beat NC State, doesn't really mean anything. They beat Virginia Tech, doesn't really mean anything. And then they beat a ranked Pitt on the road the last week of the season by 31 points. Pitt, I don't think, is ended up in the committee's top 25. No, they didn't. So like, both of these teams are in the same boat of like, we talked about this earlier in the season of like, oh, this team is overrated. It's like, okay, well, who do you put in their place? Well, I don't really know. And it's especially interesting compared to the conversation we had before we started about the last year of the 4-team playoff, that really there were 7 teams that were good enough that they could have won a national championship if the playoff was big enough. Then, of course, they expanded to 12, and it just kind of works out this year that we have teams that are in that, like, really we don't think are going to be that competitive, or for a national championship, or they would need a lot of things to like really go their way for it to work out that way. But whoever wins this Miami Texas A&M game is going to play Ohio State. Whoever wins this game is going to play Ohio State. And Ohio State showed in the Big Ten championship that they can be vulnerable. Whoever wins this one then finally sort of gets like a true kind of marquee win for them, besides Notre Dame, who they already had, but we're still like, how much weight does that bear? So I'm really, really intrigued by this game. I think both of these teams clearly have the talent on the roster to be a national champion. The question is, can they play like it? And I think even in both of these teams, their win against Notre Dame, which is the best win for both of them on their schedule, they showed flaws. They showed significant flaws. And then, of course, even since then, they've shown flaws as well. So I think it'll be really, really interesting to sort of see, okay, which gives way first. Like, one of you needs to have a good win after next weekend. Who's going to go and take it? So I'm really, really looking forward to that one.
I think that's a good shout. I think that another thought of mine with regards to a couple of the other teams and matchups here that we didn't talk about in JMU, in Tulane, in Ole Miss, is that we have playoff teams here that their coaches have already taken other jobs, obviously, with Lane Kiffin being the biggest name. It seems like because we've had the playoff expansion already, that people like that, people want to see more games. They want to see more teams have a shot. A lot of folks do. But the other thing is, because of the nature of the calendar, as far as when coaches are getting fired and when early signing day is, we also have these coaches that are leaving or aren't able to stay with their team or are in a temporary basis where it's uneven. And how do we feel about these first round games in these expanded playoffs when these teams aren't necessarily 100% whole? Like a team like Ole Miss that played well this year, got good wins, is a good team. But the thing is, they are not who they were as far as their offensive staff and their ability to scheme offense in a big spot here after they hypothetically would beat Tulane. The thing is, like, I feel like because of the nature of where college football is right now, what's the point of the expanded playoffs if every year turns out to be like this year, where teams that are even making the playoffs aren't 100% whole? So what's the point of letting in more teams if they don't really have a shot because of the nature of the calendar and when coaches are leaving? Do you have any thoughts on that, Jack, or is that just a little too vague?
Yeah, I mean, for one, I will say that there's a big difference between this year and last year in terms of the way the playoff works with the calendar, and that is the transfer portal window. There is not Last year, once the season was over, the transfer portal window basically opened, which meant you had some unfortunate situations. Last year, Penn State's backup quarterback Bo Pribula, he's now the starting quarterback at Missouri, or at least, who knows, he might jump in the portal here in a couple weeks. You never know with these things. But he left the team in the middle of their run to through the college football playoff because he's looking around and he's like, teams are going and they're getting their quarterback already. There's not going to be a place for me. And James Franklin, who was the Penn State head coach at the time, to his credit, said, Bo left, and it really sucks. We didn't want him to leave at all, and we definitely didn't want him to leave now. He didn't want to leave now, but that's just the situation that the calendar makes. So, one step at a time. There's a chance that we see that change here, now. Another change to it. Now that we've experienced this 12-team playoff, we've experienced a situation like Lane Kiffin is really the only one to mention because both John Summerall and Bob Chesney are still coaching their teams until everything ends for them. But maybe we see some change there. The big problem, and again, we're going to get to the college football playoff and its issues and, fixes later, but college football does not have a commissioner. There isn't a hierarchy. There isn't someone who's above the conferences. And there needs to be, to set some of these things. Who knows if we'll ever see it? We probably won't because the SEC and Big Ten have all the power right now. They don't want to give it up. They've sort of monopolized college football, and we're just kind of stuck living in it and dealing with the ramifications of their actions, unfortunately. Um, so yeah, so I'm not sure that there is a way to fix it without having someone in charge that can put everyone in their place. Um, yeah, like there is no issues with tampering, right? There's tampering all of the time, and there's no ramifications for it. Um, like it's just there's you're just kind of stuck with this. Um, Unfortunately. And unlike with the NFL, where both coaches and players, when they sign a contract, are tied to that contract, to that team, to that organization. In college football, players sign contracts, especially with NIL or whatever, but it's always they can leave whenever they want. So, like, in the NFL, you wouldn't see Mike Tomlin leave the Steelers to go take the New York Giants coaching job because he's not allowed to. Because unless the Steelers trade him there, as long as he is, employed by Pittsburgh, he can't do anything, right? So, that's one of the big things, and that's just not going to change unless we get some true leadership. All right. So we talked about the a little bit, these first four games. Um, Nick, I have another question though before we move into talking about Notre Dame a little bit. Of all of the teams that are playing next weekend, that are the teams on the road, right? The lower seeded team. Which
Yes.
one do you think has the best chance of going on a run that gets them at least to the semifinal? So, upsetting next weekend and then upsetting the weekend after when they play their team
Mhm.
with their first round bye.
Mhm. I I'll just go out on a limb and say not James Madison and not Tulane. So that's really a 50-50 coin flip then between Miami and Alabama, which brings us back to the conversation we were having before, me about Alabama and Oklahoma, you about Miami and A&M. I would prob I would probably say Alabama if the game against Georgia wasn't a blip as far as their quarterback situation and offense, I would say. I just don't know that this Miami team currently, because like you were saying, Miami and A&M, their biggest wins are against Notre Dame. But the thing is, those big wins against Notre Dame were months ago in August and early September. And I just don't know that I trust either of them to play their best football right now. And so I think I would lean Alabama as far as all the options.
Okay.
Not a great feel, but that's my pick to it.
Yeah. So this is going to sound crazy.
Okay.
Okay. What what I'm about to say is truly going to sound crazy. Um, well, let me say something else first. I think if I had to place money on one of them, I would say Miami, um, because they haven't played A&M yet. There's no confidence that A&M has or can have of like, well, we already beat this team. Oklahoma already beat Alabama, and they did it at Alabama. They're playing them at home this time, and they did it post John Mateer's injury as well. So it's
Mhm.
not they're going to look very similar. That team is going to Oklahoma is going to look very similar to the one that already beat Alabama this year.
Mhm.
So I think Miami has the best shot.
Sure.
Like if I was required to place money and I need the money and I need to win, I'm placing it on Miami. However, the bang for your buck pick of James Madison intrigues me. Okay? So
Mm.
here's why. Let me be the spokesperson for James Madison for a second. James Madison, under Bob Chesney, and even before that, because Kurt Signetti was the head coach there before Bob Chesney,
Right.
has
Mhm.
been by far the most powerful, physical group of five team out there, bar none. Memphis has been good. They've played well against some good teams here and there. Tulane, sure. Like fine. Or over the last like 4 years or so. But James Madison has been the one that has been the most physical and most powerful of all of the group of five teams. Okay, so let's start with that. Second, if you look at Oregon, you can sort of go through the same, thought process, thought experiment, case study that we did with both Miami and Texas A&M. Their big game was against Indiana, and they lost. Other than that, their big win was Penn State in the whiteout, but Penn State ended up going 6-6. So, they did beat USC, but also I think we all sort of knew that USC sort of had being a top 17 team was sort of the peak for them this year. Though there was improvement there for that defense that has always sort of let them down under Lincoln Riley. So, give the credit there that it's due. But also USC is Notre Dame's biggest win. So how does that sort of balance the scales when you think about it that way, right? So the path, all that to say, I think the path, while it is not easy to find and it takes a lot of trees falling at the right time for you to find this path, the path is there for James Madison against Oregon that I don't think it is for Tulane against Ole Miss, because we already saw that game and Ole Miss beat him by 35 points. And then on top of that, if you win that one, because again, gets to the semifinals, right? Which means you need to win your next game. They would be playing against Texas Tech, which is a much easier opponent than Miami would face in Ohio State, or Bama would face in Indiana, or Tulane would face in Georgia. So if you're looking for the money value play, the money value play is James Madison, because they are the 12 seed, which means they're the worst of all four of the lower seeded teams from this next week. But I think they would have potentially the easier path to get there than some of these other teams do. So, but that said, Miami's my pick. I just don't want to throw away the Tulane and James Madison without giving them a little bit of credit, because you did have to win enough to get there. So
sure. I'm curious if there is a bit of a mismatch between Summerall and his defensive scheme against an offensive staffless Ole Miss. I know that that's just one game if we're talking about a single game upset, and I know they played already this year. But what happens if Ole Miss's offense is just putrid and can't do anything? Because the thing is, because they don't have an offensive staff right now functionally at Ole Miss, and they played already, I actually think I would give the edge to Tulane as far as a one-game scenario, because they're not coming up with anything new. They're purely drawing from their playbook of what they've been operating under. And also, they're not going to have quality play calling or offensive coaching as far as in-game coaching. And so I'd be really curious if you could just have Tulane completely expose an Ole Miss offense if you can shut down the run with Lacey and then make Trinidad Chambliss really struggle potentially. I know we saw the game already, but I feel like it could be a big flip spot for why Summerall is as good as some folks think he is,
Yeah, I mean, the one thing is, as of right now, recently, Ole Miss's offensive coordinator from this last year, he will be back there to call the game. But that said, I don't know that he's there right now and there for all of the lead up. I don't know the details of that. He may literally just be going back to call plays, so I don't know for sure. But I do think you make a good point there, right? You want to talk about two diametrically opposed teams that have lost their head coach in terms of Tulane and Ole Miss, and the way that they've done it, Summerall was very complimentary of Tulane. Tulane was very complimentary of him, being like, we knew that, he was going to get a job and we're happy for him. Yes, of course we want him to coach here. He's been very adamant, like, no, I'm not leaving until that team season is over, as opposed to the whole Lane Kiffin mess. Which I let me just say this again. We're not talking about Michigan today, but if Kalen DeBoer leaves Alabama for Michigan, which people are talking like that might happen, it would not surprise me if before Lane Kiffin even coaches a spring practice, he's leaving LSU to go be the head coach of Alabama. And it doesn't surprise me because that sounds so much like Lane Kiffin, so anyway, and I only bring that up because, again, we're talking about the difference in the mess of a coach leaving from Tulane and John Summerall and a coach leaving Ole Miss in Lane Kiffin.
That being said, also about Tulane, my mindset about them versus Ole Miss, I still think they will get utterly smacked by their next matchup. So it doesn't make sense as far as a 2-game run. But a 1-game shot, I think that's interesting in a way. But
yeah, for sure. All right. Let's transition to talking about Notre Dame. Notre Dame was going into last week. I think they were ranked number 9.
9?
Before conference championship weekend, they were ranked number 9. BYU, or no, they were ranked number 10. They're ranked number 10. BYU was ranked number 11. Miami was ranked number 12. BYU gets blown out by Texas Tech in their conference championship game. They fall. Miami moves up. In theory, the way it sort of works, BYU falls, Miami moves up. Notre Dame and Miami are right next to each other. And according to the playoff committee chair, then they finally had to talk about the two of those teams next to each other, and head-to-head had to come up. And because of that, Miami jumps Notre Dame. Before we get into talking about Notre Dame and the way that their athletic director has reacted and everything that is just so absolutely crazy, the place where I will stand with Notre Dame in this whole mess is the way that they felt like, because they had every reason to, we're good. We're ahead of Miami. We've been ahead of Miami this whole time. Nothing should change now without the two of us playing a game. Okay? Notre Dame was completely right to believe that. The fact is, Miami should have jumped Notre Dame weeks ago.
Yes.
And they didn't. And even though I believe, and Nick, I think you believe as well, the committee did the right thing by finally vaulting Miami over Notre Dame so that Miami gets in the playoff ahead of Notre Dame. While I believe, and there are a lot of people believe that was the right decision to make in the end, the process that got us there was absolutely a joke. And the committee totally messed it up. They totally messed it up. They didn't know what they were doing. Every single time that the college football playoff committee chair was talking, he made no sense. The stuff that he said made no sense. Like, he was talking like he wasn't going to get pushed or pressured on anything. Like, they're going to ask a question, he just has to answer, and then they're just going to go, oh well, that's the answer, that's it. No. To Reese Davis's credit, on the selection day show, when they talked to him, he said Miami gets in over Notre Dame. What made that happen? And he's like, well, BYU lost, and so that put them next to each other. We had to compare them, and they had nearly identical resumes, but the head-to-head won out. And he said that thinking like, and there we go. I answered that question. That's, move on. And Reese Davis was like, okay, but how is it possible that it was until now that you talked about that? Yeah. And you didn't know what to do. And the thing that he ended up saying is like, well, we thought that Notre Dame was better than BYU, and BYU was better than Miami. And because of that, then we had to do Notre Dame, BYU, Miami. Well, once BYU lost, and we then felt like Miami was better than BYU, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. And so Notre Dame has a right to complain about that they felt like we're good. We're in an okay spot. As long as BYU loses the Big 12 title game, we're in. Everything else that Notre Dame has said and done is completely childish and ridiculous. That is coming from me. That is not coming from our podcast as a whole. Nick, I will let you share your opinion on it. But from me, Notre Dame has been childish and they've been ridiculous thus far. Nick, what is your thoughts on Notre Dame, their complaints, their rationale, where they're at, what makes sense, what doesn't, in terms of them feeling cheated and screwed by the College Football Playoff Committee on Selection Sunday? We'll get into the aftermath after that, but just specifically the Selection Sunday thing and the rankings, then what happened with Notre Dame.
Jack, this thing, like you said, the right outcome with regards to this happened as far as Miami should have been over Notre Dame, but the way we got here was a mess. Basically, to me, it seemed like the committee was saying, well, we think that BYU's right in between them, but now because BYU moved, because they lost in a championship game, which they don't punish some teams for losing championship games like Alabama, but they do others like SMU last year. I just feel like they were trying to be clever, trying to set up a moment where, well, they're right next to each other. Our hands are tied. We think that Notre Dame might be better, but head-to-head happened. We couldn't do anything about it. They're next to each other. And to me, it really just feels like if you've ever met one of those couples at a family gathering or something, and you can tell that they want to go home, but they have like a little baby or a little kid, and they're like, oh, we have to go home. The baby's tired and we need to put her to bed. We don't want to go, but the baby needs to go to bed. It just feels like the committee was like, well, we know Notre Dame's good, but Miami, well, we have to, like, we don't want to, but we have to.
Yeah.
And it feels like it was a spot that was kind of cowardly by them. Like you said, I completely agree. They should have done this months ago, where put BYU above both of them or put BYU behind both of them weeks and weeks and weeks ago. Like, we know, we knew seemingly when the cards fell how they did that, okay, we know they're going to end up right up against each other or at least near each other, and Miami should be ahead of Notre Dame because of the head-to-head. And it seems like they were just trying to set it up for this to be able to have this excuse. When the thing is, by them having that excuse, that opens up more questions than if they had just had Miami above Notre Dame for weeks, because now Notre Dame has the excuse of, we were better than them. We were better than them. We were better than them for weeks and weeks and weeks. We were above them. We didn't play a game. They didn't play a game, and we flipped. What happened? If you just had Miami above Notre Dame this entire time, you wouldn't have to deal with that and have to come up with excuses for that. If you had just done that weeks ago, and you're opening yourself up for that criticism, that's legitimate, reasonable criticism. Like, that's fair. It is by people who are thinking competently. And I think it's just the committee not operating from a sense of what they actually should be doing. They're trying to play little games, it feels like. Not big games, but little games that they think they're being clever. And this was not clever.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. It was, again, in the end, the result was the right result. I really think that. But the whole process, I mean, it was a mess. It was a joke. It doesn't make any sense. So now let's talk about Notre Dame after the fact. For one, Notre Dame athletic director Pete Bevacqua has said a lot of things, and a lot of them have been directed towards and against the Atlantic Coast Conference. And as a fan of a team in the Atlantic Coast Conference, I have a lot of opinions about it. One of the things that he said was that he thought it was a joke and disrespectful, and that it did irreparable damage for the ACC to vouch for Miami instead of and not vouch for Notre Dame at all. That was one of the things. I mean, I forget the exact words that he used, but that was the point that he was making. Let's talk about how absolutely ridiculous that is, okay? Notre Dame, you are not in a conference. You are so proud of the fact that you are not in a conference. Everyone, you're like, we're not going to be in a conference, and we don't care, and you have to bow to us. We're going to do what we're going to do. Fine. Do what you want to do. Do not expect any conference to help you out. Don't at all. I do not care that 24 other sports you play in the ACC. Does not matter. Because guess what? Football isn't one of them. The ACC gets $8 million in revenue to split amongst themselves because Miami got in. If you had gotten in, you wouldn't have been giving the ACC any of your $8 million. You would have been keeping it all for yourself. You have no right to complain about Miami and about the ACC running their race and pushing and pushing and pushing for them to get in. You were offended that the ACC network took an entire 24 hours just showing a replay of Miami beating you. If you had beaten them, they wouldn't have been able to do it now, would they? That's the facts. You are not part of the ACC because we're just talking about football. If you wanted to be part of the ACC for football, I guarantee you the ACC would be so thrilled to let you join them. But you aren't. So that's the facts. They owe you nothing when it comes to football. In fact, the ACC has bent over backwards for you far more than they should have. During COVID, they let you be part of the ACC so you could play a season. They didn't have to do that. You have a deal with them that you have to play 5 or 6 ACC teams every year. But guess what? That's how you fill out a schedule. They don't have to do that, but they do. Frankly, I think the ACC should totally drop Notre Dame at this point. That would be my thought after all of this, because I don't see what purpose Notre Dame serves. There is no way that the amount of money that Notre Dame pays the ACC, combined with the revenue that Notre Dame brings into the ACC and the 24 other sports that they're part of the ACC, outweighs the money that the ACC would have lost if Notre Dame got in over Miami. There's no way that that's the case. So, Pete Bevacqua attacking the ACC is stupid. You're saying that they've done irreparable damage. No, you have done irreparable damage to your relationship with that conference. What you're doing is absolutely ridiculous. What you've said is absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, Jack, I completely understand where you're coming from. I don't really take offense or have any issue with any of that. I think that Notre Dame's AD clearly, whether he believes everything he's saying or he's been told go on a war path for us, somebody at Notre Dame feels that sort of way and feels very wronged and feels very angry. And Marcus Freeman is salty, and they're not going to play in a bowl game because they're salty. But this is the kind of stuff that happens when you don't have management and leadership that is able to produce a structure that works. Notre Dame not being in a conference is part of the problem. But the thing is, even if they were in a conference, then the conference would still be fighting for their own. And like you're seeing the ACC fight for Notre Dame, you see the SEC, every single one of the schools fight for the SEC and vice versa. If you had an overarching body for all of college football that was able to make everything even as far as the conferences, to create a structure for schedules for the playoffs, you'd have much less of this as far as funky scheduling and having to stomp your feet to be able to get your team in and having to fight for that. And also, I feel like it's just that so much, it's not self-centered, but it's school-centered of like, we're Notre Dame, we deserve to get in, we're better. And it's like, hey, you may feel all those sorts of ways. You haven't won a national championship in decades. You haven't won a conference because you haven't been in a conference. Like, you think you're all that. Come on, like, join a conference. You get all the privileges. You don't get all the money that you do by being your own thing. But also, like, this is why you need management to put a school like this in their place and say, you can't just be floating out here. You can't just be doing your own thing. Because the thing is, it's bad and wrong for Notre Dame to be doing their own thing and have that power. But it's also wrong to be put in a position where your ego's able to get to be that big. Because Notre Dame's ego is that big because they haven't been put in check. Doesn't mean the ego's right or wrong, but that's why you need a bigger overarching structure and organization so that you don't have stuff like that happening.
Yeah. And like the other thing, the way that rules and stuff just get bent left and right for Notre Dame just makes no sense. It was revealed this week that an agreement was reached with the College Football Playoff Committee that starting next year, as long as Notre Dame is ranked in the top 12 before or on Selection Sunday, they will get into the College Football Playoff. I don't know who gets left out in that situation. I don't know if that means that the lowest, conference champion doesn't get in.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's not that, and it means that Notre Dame's ranked 11, and you've got, let's say it is, BYU ahead of them,
Mm-hmm.
and they get left out because of Notre Dame, that's just completely ridiculous. That's completely ridiculous. Because of that just getting revealed, conferences are considering basically what they're calling freezing out Notre Dame and not allowing their teams, their schools to schedule games against them. Now imagine if every year we didn't get to see Notre Dame USC, one of the richest rivalries and traditions in college football. Notre Dame already left the rivalry they had with Michigan. They used to play every year. That doesn't happen anymore. It hasn't happened in years. Now imagine if Notre Dame doesn't get to play USC. Imagine if we get to a point that we see Notre Dame play a schedule similar to that of UConn. UConn also does a similar thing of playing a few ACC schools, and then they're playing like MAC schools and American schools. That would just be ridiculous. But here's the thing. The only time I ever say that Notre Dame needs to join a conference is because I think that they're too proud and too arrogant. In reality, if they don't want to be part of a conference, that is totally their prerogative. Mm-hmm. The problem is, now we're in a situation like this, and they're complaining. They're basically doing we're taking our ball and we're going home. And in doing so, everyone is just doing whatever they can to make them happy again, which is absolutely ridiculous. Because again, the thing that we can use to overarch this whole conversation related to Notre Dame is if you beat Texas A&M or if you beat Miami, this isn't a question. It's not a question. It's not like they were 12-0, didn't play a conference championship game and got dropped because of it. No. Nothing got taken from you. You lost games. That's just the facts of it.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing is, though, with Notre Dame, as far as like if they're in the top 12, then they automatically get in before championship week. I just think that that's kind of ridiculous because that presumes that they're basically their own conference champion. Basically, like if you're good, you won a conference. Like the fact of the matter is, this is why when we talked about it last week or 2 weeks ago, being like, this is why good teams that aren't playing in conference championships should play games against other good teams during that week. Why we should have Ole Miss and A&M play and those sorts of games happening during conference championship week, because like these teams are just sitting home and basically have it locked up and don't have to play a meaningful game there to affect their resume. But there are teams like Georgia or Alabama that are playing games that affect their resume. Mm-hmm. Like that's just kind of ridiculous as far as why is it that the equation has these teams played 12 games, these teams played 13 games, and we kind of are taking the 13th into account, but not completely because some teams did and some teams didn't. It just makes it completely more uneven. And the other thing is with a team like Notre Dame that's never going to play that 13th game as far as them not being in a conference, they basically like that's why you need a team like that to be playing a game during that week. to be able to have a measuring stick of how good they actually are in that spot late in the season.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you with that as well. Um, all right. One other thing that was just absolutely ludicrous that Notre Dame's AD Pete Bavacqua said is that he said that their 10-game run, their last 10 games of the season, was the greatest 10-game run of any team in college football history. I would like you all to know that there are probably 4 or 5 teams this year that had a better 10-game run to end the season than Notre Dame. You can go look at it. I mean, I would say Indiana, their last 10 games, they beat Ohio State in the Big Ten championship. That alone is a better 10-game run. Because also part of that 10-game run was beating Oregon in Eugene, Oregon. Far superior, far superior. Texas Tech, their last 10 games included winning the Big 12 and destroying BYU in the process. It's just that's just ludicrous. That's just ludicrous and ridiculous, and just an absolutely horrendous thing to say. Last thing that I want to say on Notre Dame before we move on for the sake of time. Well, one, we didn't even mention the fact that they're not playing in a bowl, which is also ridiculous. I'll mention it briefly. There are 2 Big 12 teams that are not playing in a bowl this year. Because they're part of the Big 12 has fined both of them $500,000 for not playing in a bowl game, because that is revenue that goes to the conference by them playing in a bowl game. I think that is very fair. Notre Dame doesn't have to face that because they're not in a conference. Again, we need someone above it all to put Notre Dame in their place. Tell them, you want to be independent, that's fine, but everyone has to pony up when something like this happens, right? So anyway, last thing to say about as we move on here, is just that, like, it's crazy to me. I've never liked Notre Dame. My whole life I've hated Notre Dame. Last year Notre Dame became somewhat likable. Like, Marcus Freeman is a really good guy. I really enjoy him. He's a good dude. He's a solid dude. And I was pulling for Notre Dame last year, in the semifinals and in the championship game. All of the good graces that Notre Dame football built last year, they have thrown away and more. Like, absolutely gone. So anyway, all right. Well, let's move on to talking about the college football playoff, because of course, like every year, everyone wants to fix the college football playoff, right? Everyone wants to fix the college football playoff. And I think there are things that need fixed, but I think the things that people want to fix don't actually need fixed. So let's just start. Nick, do you think that the college football playoff needs expanded to 16 teams?
I don't know that they do, because, like, the playoffs is to win the whole thing. And you have I always compare college football to the NFL, because the NFL is what I know best, and college football I know less. And, like, I still get college football, but NFL, like, makes sense to me. NFL lets in 14 teams to the playoffs currently, and it lets in teams year after year after year that get obliterated. Like, I'm a Steelers fan. I am a, like, known Steelers fan. I'm a Steelers fan. Like, I know my Steelers, and I have watched them for the better part of the last decade get their teeth kicked in playoff game after playoff game after playoff game after playoff game. I was just saying the other day to one of my roommates, to be in the playoffs is a reward. It's a great thing to be in the playoffs. To be in the playoffs when you know you're about to get your teeth kicked in is not a reward. It's like going into a boxing match and knowing that you're about to get knocked out in the first minute. Like, it's just not a joy to me when you know you're about to leave with bruised ribs and broken bones and a black eye. Like, I feel like right now the college football playoff is in a spot where, because we only recently expanded, where there are gonna be blowouts. There are always blowouts in college football. In the 14 playoff era, there were blowouts in college football, a la Alabama and Notre Dame in the championship. Like there always are blowouts. Like it happens. But the thing is, first round blowouts when you have such a mismatch in seeding, I'm not a big fan of. And like if you're Tulane or James Madison, we don't know what it's going to look like down the line after you made the playoffs this year. What if Tulane goes on a run here, not singularly this year, but like a multi-year? Tulane makes the playoffs next year and next and the year after and the year after. We don't know what's going to happen to that program as far as their ability to generate revenue and produce good players and have good teams. And so I feel like we're still in a spot where we don't know what these lower level, not power conference teams are going to look like in the big picture. And so I don't feel the need to expand it, but I also don't feel the need to immediately contract it. But between the two, if I were to guess what my feelings are going to be, it would be more to detract the number or subtract from the playoff field than have more teams in it as far as competitive football and teams that actually have a shot to win the whole thing. Like I don't feel like I'm gonna look at the playoffs in the next 3, 4, 5 years and be like, you know what we need? We really need like this year's USC to make the playoffs. Like Notre Dame, I don't have a big issue with, but it's like you know what this playoffs really needs? Iowa. Like I just don't see that as being something that I take a massive issue with of we need to add more teams that are about to get their S rocked. Like there are going to be more teams that are on that borderline, and the more and more you expand, the more teams you're going to see get their heads blown off in game one. And I'm not very much for that. So those are my feelings on it.
Yeah, I do not think that this needs expanded. I think 12 teams is fine. I think letting group of 5 teams in is totally fine. Um, because similar to the NFL, similar to college basketball, there are teams that get in that are far worse than some teams that get left out. But the fact is, they earned their way by winning a conference, right? Like the one that I make especially with this, comes from college basketball. Like you cannot tell me that Texas A&M Corpus Christi is better than Syracuse basketball every single year. You cannot convince me of that. However, Texas A&M Corpus Christi wins their conference and gets in. And Syracuse does not win their conference and does not play well enough outside of winning their conference to get in. But I tell you what, if you put both of them on the same floor, Syracuse is going to win that game probably 19 out of 20 times, right? But that's how it works, right? This year, there's going to be a NFC team with a lot of wins that gets left out of the playoffs. That's not going to win their or division, and they're not going to be a wild card team. That would absolutely blow the barn doors off of whoever comes out of the NFC South. Like that's going to happen, whether it's San Francisco or it's Chicago or it's Detroit, whatever. That's going to happen. But it doesn't matter because you built the structure in that way. And they've built the college football playoff structure in that same way. So telling me, oh, we got to get rid of the group of 5 because Tulane got in and Notre Dame didn't, it's like, well, you set it up that Tulane has a shot if they win their conference. And they did. And same thing with James Madison, right? So like I think that the idea of eliminating the group of 5 is ridiculous. And I think that the idea of expanding is also poor because, like, if we expand, when do we stop? Right? Like, if we expanded all the way to 64 teams, you know that teams 65, 66, and 67 is going to be complaining and saying that they got robbed of playing in the college football playoff. When the fact of the matter is, like, no, you didn't. You weren't good enough, right? Until we get to the point, and it will never happen because of how saturated, how big power conferences are now. This will never happen. But until we get to the point that we are leaving out one loss power conference teams because there isn't enough room, which will never happen because it's set up that way. That will never happen. But if we ever got to that point, then maybe you could convince me. But that won't happen, right? So like I keep saying, these teams that are complaining about not getting in, none of them got screwed. I wish all of them had Vanderbilt head coach Clark Lee as their head coach because he has been phenomenal about this. He has said, Vanderbilt was a team that some people thought should get in. They went 10-2 this year. He said, "Guess we didn't get in, but you know what? We lost 2 games. If we had won one of those games, we would have gotten in. If we'd beaten Texas back when Texas was not as good, we would have gotten in. If we beat Alabama like we did last year, we would have gotten in. But that didn't happen, right? And so that's that. Like that's the thing. And like so adding I don't want to expand to the point that we're like 24 teams and we're arguing about, oh, well, are we going to put 8-4 Missouri or 8-4 Iowa in? Like no.
Right.
That's so when people talk about fixing the college football playoff, those are things that I'm like, that's not fixing it. That's just causing more problems or making the issue instead of being around teams, 10 through 14. Now we're having the issue around teams 22 through 25, like at least that's the way I see it with that.
Right. The other thing is the nature with football, like college basketball and March Madness is its own beast. But the thing is, you're able to have those massive brackets and letting so many teams in. And like that does produce upsets sometimes, but like trying to find a bottom seed versus top seed upset where it's like a massive upset is very rare. But the thing is, basketball is basketball. And you're able to play games on back to back days or every couple of days because it's basketball. These are young men who are putting their bodies on the line, who are getting their heads knocked off, who are messing up their knees, who are battered and bruised after all these games, who can only play these games once a week. And if you keep expanding and expanding and expanding, it's going to mean more wear and tear going later into the season, competing with the NFL playoffs, which isn't a great idea. It just opens up more avenues for messes to happen, I think, if you start trying to expand it more and more and more and more, especially when you're in a good spot with championship teams who won their conference get in. And if you're in a conference where your champion is so damn good, where you can be incredibly good and still not be the champion of your conference, you still get in. I think that's a good spot to be in when you have something like prime Michigan a couple years ago who was smacking everybody, but Ohio State should still get in because Ohio State's still really good. This is a system that allows for spots like that, like the old system did not. And I think that if you're stuck in a conference where you got Alabama and Georgia, and then if it's a good LSU year, I think it's good that it allows for multiple teams from a conference to make it. But I don't think you need Alabama and Georgia and LSU and Ole Miss and Vanderbilt. Like, we don't need that, but we do need more than just a conference championship, basically, from each conference outside of the SEC, because the SEC was the SEC. So
Sure. Yeah. So here's a question that I've got. And it's one that I'm going to ask you, but really it's a question that I would like to ask the College Football Playoff Committee. And that is the goal of this playoff is the goal of this playoff to get the actually let me ask something else first. When you create, because the way that we are to understand it, and even though the media doesn't talk about it this way, the media doesn't talk about the top 25 rankings, they talk about the bracket and who got left out. But the fact is, and I mentioned this to you, we need to make sure that the committee is thinking about the rankings, because the committee is supposed to rank the top 25 teams in college football. And then we have a system and a formula that tells us which of those teams end up in the bracket. And that's where we're supposed to convert the top 25 teams and put them in a 12-team bracket.
mm-hmm.
Is the committee actually thinking about the rankings, or are they thinking about the bracket? because they shouldn't be thinking about the bracket. They should be thinking about the rankings, right? We should not be asking them on Selection Sunday, okay, so what led you to put Miami going to Texas A&M for their matchup? Because to them, it should be like, well, we weren't thinking about that at all. We just believe that Texas A&M is the 7th best team in the country and Miami is the 10th, and it worked out then that that's the matchup, right? So I think we need to make sure that we, meaning the committee, but also us, because we don't talk that way. We don't talk about the rankings. We just talk about the bracket. We're like, oh my gosh, Notre Dame got left out of the playoff. We should be saying, oh my gosh, Notre Dame was ranked the 11th best team in the country, right? That's what we should be saying, okay? But from there, here's the question that the committee needs to really sit down and ask themselves and try to figure out the answer to. When we put the playoff together, are we trying to put the 12 best teams in the playoff? Or are we trying to put the 12 most deserved teams in the playoff? Because I'll be honest, right now, I do think that Notre Dame is better than Miami. However, I don't think Notre Dame deserved to be in instead of Miami. Those are two very different things. And if we're going for the 12 best teams, then of course get rid of Group of 5 because, you know, or the automatic qualifier for the Group of 5. If we have a team like Boise State last year worked their way up into that, totally different, right? But if we're going for best, then get rid of all requirements of conference champions, right? Because that shouldn't matter if we're just trying to get the 12 best teams. We want the top 12 teams in college football to be playing in this playoff. Or is it most deserved? In which case we need to remember that it's most deserved and make sure we actually have a ranking system based on most deserved, right? But there's too much of this both, right? There's too much of this both. And that's where I feel the biggest, if you want to talk about the biggest fix to the college football playoff, we need to make sure it's either most deserved or it's best, right? Not don't mix the two, right? Don't be like, oh well, this team is better than this team. Oh well, this team deserves it over this team when we're looking at these rankings, right? Because you know, if we want to talk most deserved, like then sure, a team with a great record. You know, we talked about what are our sort of top 4 where we rank these, you know, things in terms of, you know, record, bad losses, good wins, and strength of schedule, right? If you want best, then record needs to be at the top. If you want most deserved, record needs to be at the top. But then it changes everything else, right? Because most deserved, well, you need to have those good wins. Best, you need to forget that a little bit more and think about, okay, bad losses. Bad losses needs to be more important because that changes, right? That changes things. And I think if the college football playoff committee could actually sit down, discuss that, come to a conclusion, answer that question, and then build everything else from that. If that means stripping what we have the college football playoff as right now and starting over, if that's what they have to do after answering that question, do we want the 12 most deserving teams? Do we want the 12 best teams? Then whatever. But the fact is they need to figure that out. They need to answer that question, and they need to go one way entirely or one way the other.
Right. Definitely the half measures is a really hard thing. But the other thing is like best and most deserving is so hard because you have a team like Texas that just beat Texas A&M. So we're like, okay, is Texas actually pretty darn good? They have some good wins, but they're not deserving because they don't have the record to back it up. But the thing is, then you have a team like BYU that won a bunch of games but lost the meaningful games as far as the late games against Texas Tech both times, right? Texas Tech both times. And so I don't know that a team, if we're talking about deserving like BYU has 11 wins. That's awesome. That's massive. You made a Big 12 championship. But the thing is, then you have good teams that aren't deserving. I think there is a measure of you have to figure out where the middle is in some ways. Because the thing is, I don't think you like there's a reason they don't want BYU in and they don't want Texas in this year. They didn't put either of them in. One of them is more deserving. One of them is better. You can figure out which one's which, but like both of them have a clear favor one way or another.
Hmm.
But the thing is, I do feel like you have to kind of decipher how you split the baby in that regard a little bit. But the thing is, it's also a matter of the scheduling and conference championship that makes it to where you can't just say like record and conferences and stuff. Where like you can't just measure things evenly between all these teams because you don't know necessarily who's better. You don't know necessarily who's deserving because the schedules are so screwed up. And so
Right.
that's my kind of issue with it. That if you tried to lean fully one way or fully another, it's not even a good measurement because you can go undefeated in a bad conference. And does that make you deserving? Like, I guess it makes you deserving, but it just leaves you with the bad. It leaves me with a bad taste in my mouth. It just is a weird spot because of the way the whole system is.
Right. Yeah, because it's comparing apples to oranges, right?
Yeah.
And the reason that I bring it up is because Notre Dame, one of Notre Dame's arguments is like, yes, Miami beat us, but that was the first week of the season. We're better than they are now. I
Right.
agree, right? So like I also think that Notre Dame is better than Miami right now. Like not just because of when Miami lost and who they lost to and how they lost to them, but also, like Syracuse played both of those teams on the road. They played Miami at Miami, they played Notre Dame at Notre Dame, and Notre Dame absolutely curb stomped and embarrassed them, right? As opposed to Miami, where it was like, I mean, they lost, but like it was, like nothing compared to a loss of 70-7, right? So like, I think Notre Dame is a better team than Miami. However, I think Miami deserves to be in over Notre Dame. And so
Mhm.
that's where we need to figure out what we're going to do here, right? Because you brought up BYU and Texas. Right now I think Texas is a better team than BYU. However, I do think BYU deserves it more, right? So like make a decision. Make it really clear too, right?
Yes.
Because that's the other thing. Is like there's so much of this, the committee's just in that room and they make decisions and then they come out and they're like, this is the way it goes, right? It's like in
Mhm.
it's
Like
like
picking
in
a new pope.
or even like like really old in like ancient Egypt where like Pharaoh would go in and be like, the God spoke to me and this is what we're supposed to do, right? And it's like,
Mhm.
okay, like
Yep.
what? Like it just seems like seems crazy. But I don't know. We're kind of talking in circles about this, but I think the main point is like, okay, there are the arguments that people are making, that teams are making as to why they're supposed to get in. They clearly don't understand if this is about who the best team is or who the most deserving team is.
Mhm.
And also there isn't, we as we've just sort of talked about and given examples, there's a clear difference between those two things, right? Some
Mhm.
of them, Indiana is the best team and is the most deserving, right? So there
Mhm.
we go. They check both boxes and that's why they're the number one seed.
Yes.
But then we get into these more gray area nitty gritty situations that it's like, well, which is which? Um, so yeah, the only other thing that I would say that I think a college football playoff needs to fix, and there are sort of two ways to look at this, but they need to find a way to make conference championship games important again. The fact is, last year, conference championship games were very important because by winning one, you got a first round bye. Um, that's not the case anymore. And so, yeah, what is the point of having a conference championship game? I mean, look, if you look at the Big 12 this year, they're probably thinking, should we get rid of the conference championship game? Because if we do, then maybe we get both Texas Tech and BYU in instead of just one over the other, right? Um, and with that, I think that they need to change the structure of what it means to be one of the top four teams. And here's why. Here's why I think that. If you look at the bracket right now, Oregon is in a far better position than Indiana is. We said it last year with Texas over Oregon. Like the 5 seed is the most valuable spot you can be in because you get to play the 12 seed, which is likely the group of 5, but not always. Last year it wasn't because of what happened with the ACC, right? So, but still, you're likely playing a group of 5 conference champion. and you are playing it at home, and that is a game that you can knock some rust off. Yes, you don't get a bye, and there's risk of players getting hurt, absolutely, but fine. Then, if you're the 5 seed, if you win that game, you then go and play the 4 seed. Oregon, if they beat James Madison, will go play Texas Tech. Indiana not playing a game, and then we'll have to play either Oklahoma or Alabama. I'd rather be the 5 seed. I'd rather get the tune-up game and then go play a far more inferior opponent. So, Nick, here's my idea to fix this, to run this by you. The top 4 seeds, okay, get to pick their path. So the 1 seed, if you're the 1 seed, you get to pick, I want to play the winner of, the 5-12, 6-11, 7-10, or 8-9 game. And then whichever one they pick, say they pick the winner, they want to play the winner of the 5-12 game. Then the 2 seed comes in, or the number 2 overall comes in, and they say, all right, well, we want to play the winner of the 7-10 game. And then the 3 comes in, we want to play the winner of the 6-11. And, 4, okay, that means we're stuck with the winner of the 8-10 or 8-9 matchup. However that looks. If you're not going to reseed after the first round, meaning that the top seed plays the lowest remaining seed and so on to work that out. If you're not going to do that, then I feel like you have to give the chance for the 1 seed to pick, who they want to play. Because say the 1 seed does pick they want to play the winner of 5-12. Okay, if the 12 seed upsets the 5 seed, then yeah, that's the best place. If the 5 seed wins, like, okay, well, maybe you would have rather played the 8 seed, right? So like there's risk that comes with that. But I think that's the best way to fix it and actually give the advantage, right? Because only the first round is at home. So if you're a bye, it's not like then you're getting to play a or you're getting to play a playoff game at home. You're traveling somewhere to play a bowl game, and play that playoff game. So that's not an advantage. Really, the only advantage you get is rest, which I don't think it's fair that the 1 seed gets the same advantage as the 4 seed, right? Like, make it make sense. Make there be value there. Um, make it so that we're not sitting here going into the Big Ten championship going, well, the only difference between this is who's undefeated going into the playoff because they're both going to get a bye no matter what. Like that's dumb. You're muted.
Yep, you're right. 100% agree with you. I love the idea. I've heard the idea and I'm 100% for it. The idea of drafting your opponent, I really like the twist that you put on it of you pick, I want to play the winner of the 5-12. So you don't know that the 12 upset the 5 or not or what happened. You're picking it before the game. I think that that's very fun. I just think we need less of like last year. Think about last year with Oregon being the number 1 team in the country. And then their first game in the playoffs was getting Ohio State and getting shellacked for
getting Ohio State at the Rose Bowl, right? So like,
yep.
They called it a home game for them. Technically, they were closer, but like, you're on a neutral field. Anything can happen on a neutral field. Ohio State got to play Tennessee in Columbus and beat the brakes off of them before that.
Yep. And that's why I feel like we need less of that, where like Ohio State didn't deserve an easy path and Oregon didn't deserve a hard path, but Oregon got screwed immediately. Like, why is it that Oregon's not getting to say, hey, we want to play against whoever, and they get lined up with the eventual national champion? And it wasn't like Ohio State went on a Cinderella run. Ohio State was smacking fools immediately and dominating people, and we knew they were great immediately. Mm-hmm. And that's because Ohio State was really good. But why is it that Oregon was punished by the bracket? We don't want that. We don't want number 1 seeds or top 4 seeds to get punished by the bracket. I agree with you there. I love the idea. I'm all for that. I think that would be really fun.
Yeah, and I guarantee you, like, and of course, if you actually asked an athletic director or a coach or a player, they'd be like, we can beat anybody, so we don't care. But I guarantee you, like, if Dan Lanning got to make a decision last year with Oregon, He would have rather played the winner of Penn State SMU, SMU a team that was far inferior opponent, Penn State a team that they had literally beaten already in the Big Ten championship on a neutral field. He would have rather played the winner of that game than the winner of Ohio State Tennessee. I guarantee you, if he had the opportunity, he would have chosen that. He may not have chosen to play the winner of Texas Clemson, but again, that's where you get to look and you get to choose, right? Like I think this year Indiana would rather play the winner of Tulane Ole Miss because Tulane is a far inferior opponent. And Ole Miss, you talked about earlier all of the weird turnover with the coaching, with the coaches and all of that, like they're very unstable right now, right? Like, yeah, because also, and I don't want them to get to pick their opponent after the games have happened, because then it's like, okay, we'll just decide that we reseed after, and whoever the highest seed is plays the lowest remaining seed, and work your way up from there. But getting to choose their path, getting to choose, okay, we're going to play the winner of this. We're going to play the winner of this. We're going to play the winner of this. And, in this case, Texas Tech is probably stuck with having to play the winner of Oklahoma, Alabama. But that's just how the cookie crumbles.
Right. And the thing is, like sometimes higher seeds are gonna be a lot less scary. Like there's a reason why if the ACC champion had been like if the ACC champion had made it to the playoffs and wasn't Duke being Duke, like why you would want to play them compared to if you wanted to play against Alabama hypothetically. Like if you played against Virginia versus Alabama, I think that even though Virginia would be a higher seed than Alabama being a conference champion, if they would have been one of the top 4 teams, I think still you would be like, okay, Virginia won their conference. It might be a higher seed, but like we still think we can smoke them. It's kind of like what's going on in the NFC South right now with Tampa Bay and the Panthers being very close to each other, where even though they're going to get a playoff game at home, you might say if you're a 1, 2, or 3 seed being like, well, we want to play them because we don't want to play against the Lions, for example, or something like that, because we think we can smoke the Panthers more than we can the Lions right now because they're the Panthers. Like we feel that way. And so I feel like giving the agency to teams that have played very well in a given season matters a lot.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, Nick, you have anything else to add about college football playoff fixes, or have we sort of covered it all?
I feel like we've covered it all. I think that it should be a pretty darn good playoffs. Hopefully, like I'm all for a little upset here and there. I think that we should have a couple of close games in the ones that we touched with Miami and Alabama and those games that those 2 teams are playing. But like, I'm looking forward to it. I think there are fixes like we're talking about. It's not a perfect system, but I do think they're moving in the right direction with this compared to the 14 playoffs. So I'm happy about that.
For sure.
I don't want to complain about improvements that are being made because there are still issues. There are still issues, but even the baby steps, I want to be like, hey, college football committee, you're going in the right direction, big picture right now. So good job on that. Want to give them credit there.
Definitely. All right. Well, everybody, enjoy the first round of the playoff games. We will probably not talk to you before then, so enjoy them. We will be here to not recover, to record and go over what happened with those in a couple weeks. Until then, enjoy NFL games this week. And of course, then that means next week we start the playoff and bowl season begins. Even though bowls don't mean anything to anyone anymore, they're still fun. And they're college football between teams that you typically don't see play each other. So that's always a cool thing too. So enjoy this weekend. Thank you again so much for your support, for watching us and tuning into what we have to say. We're just a couple of Joe Schmoes who like football and we like talking about it. So it's always good to feel the support from you all as well. Enjoy this weekend, stay safe, and have a good one, everybody.